occurred. This shipwreck is the latest along the route where more than 300 migrants have died so far this year. CGTN's Adel Al-Maroui joins us live from Cairo. Adel, what is the latest on the search for the missing people from the rubber boat accident? Over to you.
Well, Richard, it's a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe happening all over again, and this is just the beginning of a series that will be happening throughout the coming months as the weather in this region warms up and it becomes more or less safe, or at least the weather conditions become more practical for migrants stranded in Libya, facing also another series of humanitarian violations and trying to flee from their circumstances in Libya to head to Europe. The SOS Mediterranean, a rescue charity European organization that has been leading the search, when you read the travel logs and the details of the rescue mission, it's quite shocking. They have about 3 distress calls from 3 migrant ships this week, just this week. One of them, they didn't find any trace of which they say maybe it has went back to the Libyan territories. The other one, the Zodiac, that was carrying around 130, it was all shattered. The waves were 6 meters high. Crew of the Ocean Viking, the rescue ship for the organization, they say the waves and the circumstances were so harsh they kept vomiting on board and that's when they were protected by a huge ship. So you can only imagine what a small Zodiac packed with 130 people would look like. Unfortunately, according to the head of the rescue mission, he says that all of them are dead, and this is an official declaration. They have, even when the bodies they found had no traces of names, name tags on them, which indicates that they've been in the water for so long. That's the shocking update about this rescue mission, which the SOS Mediterranean said had no government assistance, whether from Europe or the Libyan side as well. And we know that with the coming wave of migrants becoming a trend once again in the spring and summertime here in this part of the world, there will be a lot of rescue efforts needed. The Libyan foreign minister paid his first visit to Italy on Friday. They discussed the humanitarian situation and the migrant issue specifically. And the Libyan foreign minister has called for the European Union to help and intervene so that they can empower the unity government in Libya to help at least prevent these boats from leaving the Libyan shores before it comes too late.
All right, Adel, let's leave it there for now. Lots to keep an eye on. Adel, thank you for bringing all of that there to light. Let's head to Zimbabwe, where at least 4 people have been killed after an Air Force helicopter crashed on a house. The dead include a child and 3 crew members. The accident occurred at Arcturus, a farming area 30 kilometers east of the capital, Harare. According to a statement from Zimbabwe's Air Force, the helicopter was on a training mission with 2 pilots and a technician when it disappeared from the radar. The Zimbabwean Air Force has been raising concerns over the country's aging helicopters and fighter jets. However, the country has been unable to purchase new planes due to sanctions imposed on it by the United States. And in India, 20 critically ill COVID-19 patients have died due to low oxygen pressure. Officials say patients were admitted to the Jaipur Golden Hospital in the capital, New Delhi. A hospital medical director says there is an extreme shortage of oxygen and supplies, and they are running out. India has seen alarming increases in infections this week. On Saturday, it is reported more than 340,000 cases, along with over 2,600 new deaths. Both are recorded highs. Ravinder Bauer reports.
It is out of control, and we have seen how now the government has sprung into action in terms of actually arranging for basic requirements like hospital beds, oxygen supply. The Air Force has been pressed into action to bring in, oxygen into those places where there is a shortage. So basically, the system is that the Air Force planes will take the empty tankers to the oxygen plants, and the tankers will be refilled, and they'll come via trains into the cities or into those places and towns where there is a shortage of oxygen to provide oxygen to the patients. On the other hand, the number of deaths are rising. If we just look at Delhi, for last 2 days, there have been more than 300 deaths and the crematoriums are overflowing. There is no place in the crematoriums to actually bid a proper goodbye to the families, and the crematoriums are now turning their parking lots into a bus crematorium. So the situation on the ground is really sad.
U.S. President Joe Biden has reinforced the message that America is back on track tackling the climate crisis. A two-day global summit hosted by the White House made bold commitments, and it explored potential ways the U.S. could become a leader in the clean energy sector. CGTN's Nathan King reports.
The first day of the Green Summit was focused on how much nations are willing to commit to cutting carbon. The final day was all about how to get there. Microsoft founder Bill Gates saying the US and the world can and must innovate their way out of the climate crisis.
We need to develop and deploy breakthrough technologies that allow us to eliminate emissions throughout the physical economy. Second, we need to tap the power markets to fund and deploy these innovations, for example, by finding creative ways to finance technologies and by leveling the playing field so they can compete with fossil fuels.
Gates says governments must come up with new policies and companies must get on board. His call came as the US President's Council of Economic Advisers published a report highlighting that China has been doing just that and now has a huge market share in the so-called clean tech industries. This chart shows China leading in solar energy, electric vehicle sales, wind turbine manufacturing, lithium battery development and more. To catch up, the Biden administration is proposing a $1.9 trillion infrastructure bill with hundreds of billions for green initiatives and a big jump in research and development spending. Biden also announced the US will be partnering with allies on big projects.
We will be joining in a partner for the nations in efforts to decarbonize critical sectors across the board, including industrial sector, where we'll join with Sweden and India and leadership in the leadership group for industry transition. The power sector, where we'll work alongside of the United Kingdom to spread progress and speed it up toward a carbon-free power system, both here and around the world.
This week has been all about the US showing the world that it's serious once again about tackling climate change and wants to lead again. The truth is that many others are leading already, and the US needs to play catch up, and quick. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
A potential new malaria vaccine has proved to be highly effective in a trial in babies in Africa. As CGTN's Jane Keogh reports, this has raised hope of reducing the massive number of deaths on the continent due to the life-threatening disease.
It's been a long journey of research against the deadly malaria parasite. But now, scientists from Britain's University of Oxford say they have hit the highest mark with its new vaccine candidate.
So one of the exciting things about this result today is that for the first time, a vaccine has reached the efficacy level that WHO have been looking for. They want a malaria vaccine with 75% or more efficacy by 2030. We think we can do that. So 77% is the highest yet and could really add to the existing tools that we use to control malaria, meaning bed nets, insecticide spraying, and giving children drugs to kill the malaria parasite during the peak of the transmission season.
The year-long vaccine trials were conducted on 450 children in Burkina Faso. The scientists who are also behind the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine say they now plan to conduct final stage trials.
We're doing that starting in just a few weeks when we will, at 5 different locations in Africa in 4 countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Burkina Faso, and Mali, vaccinate young children again, this time 5 to 36 months of age. There'll be almost 5,000 subjects in the trial. And we will follow those for some time, vaccinating them against malaria, or in some cases with a control vaccine, and asking how protective the vaccine is, but very importantly, monitoring those thousands of subjects for safety.
Malaria has been a complex challenge for scientists across the world. The world's first and only licensed malaria vaccine developed by GlaxoSmithKline is only partially effective at around 30%. The malaria parasite is carried in the saliva of Anopheles mosquitoes.
There are multiple stages to the parasite's life cycle, so it's complex. But this is the sporozoite stage. Immediately after the mosquito bites you, it injects sporozoites. And if you can tackle that stage of the life cycle and clear the infection, that will prevent any disease. And that's what we're doing in most of these children when we vaccinate them. The problem, as you say, is you need very high levels of immunity to get a malaria vaccine work. So we've really optimized the design of a previous vaccine called RTSS. We think we're producing stronger antibodies. They seem to be a bit more durable and certainly a bit more protective. And that's because we have redesigned, if you like, the vaccine itself and added a different adjuvant.
Malaria kills up to 1 million people annually, with children and expectant mothers the most affected. Africa records the highest number of these deaths due to poverty and poor health infrastructure. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Time now for a short break. The news continues on Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news. Here's what's ahead. MSF urges rich countries to stop blocking patent waivers to boost global production of coronavirus vaccines.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for sticking with us. South Sudan's health ministry says it will roll out a vaccination campaign against COVID-19 across the country next week. The government says it has now inoculated more than 2,000 healthcare workers in the capital, Juba. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The health ministry says it is targeting all medical personnel in the country in the first vaccination drive. The inoculation was launched in early April for medical personnel in Juba. However, the health ministry now says it wants to take the vaccination campaign to healthcare workers in the country's rural areas.
The only intervention that will release us and get back to something of semblance of normality is the vaccination. When a big proportion of the country is vaccinated, we will be sure we could get back to our normal way of life.
Taking the vaccines to rural areas, however, comes with the challenge of storing the medicines at the state hospitals. Many of the hospitals at South Sudan's state levels don't have facilities that can safely store COVID-19 vaccines. The government says it plans to vaccinate about 27,000 healthcare workers across the country. It says it plans to use air ambulances donated by the UN to fight COVID-19. South Sudan received 132,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines from COVAX facility in late March with support from the United Nations. The UN says it will support taking the COVID-19 vaccines across South Sudan.
The healthcare workers being the most critical people who first need to be vaccinated. You're our frontline workers to protect all of the children, the families, the people of South Sudan. And you have gone in harm's way to do that over and over again. I'm very excited that the healthcare workers are prioritized.
The health ministry says it plans to inoculate healthcare workers in states near the capital where the air ambulance can go and return the same day. It says vaccines that are not used would then be returned to a store in the capital as it works to sort out the problem of storage at the local government level. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Because of the COVID-19 vaccine challenges in the African continent, the MSF is urging rich countries to stop blocking a patent waiver plan that could boost the global production of the coronavirus vaccines. Now, this comes as members of the World Trade Organization meet this week to discuss a proposal to waive intellectual property rights for producing COVID-19 vaccines. Sponsors of the waivers argue that the temporary suspension would allow more factories to produce the vaccines without breaking international rules. The proposal has, however, been opposed by rich countries like the U.S. and EU member states. Let's bring in Kate Stegeman, the advocacy coordinator, MSF Access Campaign South Africa. She joins us via Zoom from Cape Town. Thank you, Kate, for joining us here on Africa Live. We appreciate your time. Kate, this seems to be a tough one for the Western powers to accept. Why do you think it is so?
From what we understand from the Access Campaign is that the countries that continue to block the waiver have a strong pharmaceutical corporation lobby in their countries. And those companies have strongly advocated for the fact that they say that in order to produce vaccines and other COVID-19 medical tools, they rely a lot on innovation. However, we would push back and say, in particular with regards to the pandemic, that has not been the case, because a lot of these COVID-19 tools and vaccines in particular have been publicly funded. So that argument to us does not hold. Another argument that they like to bring up as well is that there isn't capacity in low and middle income developing countries. And again, we would push back and say this isn't the case. We already see, a deal at the moment with pharmaceutical companies in countries like India, and the waiver would hopefully allow us to bolster manufacturing capacity in more of these companies in the global south.
All right, that brings me to my next question, Kate. Now, supposing they do bow to the pressure and allow the patent waiver, how would this actually change the situation, considering Africa's vaccine manufacturing gaps?
I think my answer to that question, Richard, is threefold. First of all, yes, Africa isn't absolutely capacitated when it comes to pharmaceutical manufacturing, but it's not like we don't have any capacity whatsoever. We know that here in South Africa, there are companies such as Aspen Pharmacare and Biovac. We know that there are a number of Pasteur institutes around the continent, particularly really strong capacity where they're already developing vaccines in countries such as Senegal. So that would be, I think, the first question, or the first part of the answer to the question. The second part is that we don't just need to rely on capacity in Africa. We know, as I mentioned earlier, that there is great vaccine manufacturing capacity already in places like India. And exactly what we're seeing at the moment with the Serum Institute of India and the fact that they're temporarily halting exports of their stocks of vaccines to be able to supply AstraZeneca doses to COVAX is exactly the problematic system we have at the moment because of an exclusive deal with a company like that. So we would hope that the waiver would be, one of a number of legal barriers that we have, that changes and I beg your pardon, so that we can be able to see a system where supply is boosted. And I think thirdly, and one of the most important aspects that's often overlooked in this debate, is that this temporary waiver proposal is not just about vaccines, it's also about other COVID-19 tools. And again, we can cite the example of Senegal, where we've already seen a partnership between a company there, Diatropics, with a company in the UK called Myologic to do diagnostic tests. We would like to see more of this happening. And we really do believe that the waiver will help pave the way to boost supply of those important things, because having a shortage of diagnostic tests is really catastrophic. We also want to see a boost to more medical capacity. We know that there are a number of companies, in the developing world. We know, for example, in Thailand, they've been able to produce generic HIV medicines. We would like to believe that were the waiver to go ahead, that these medicines for COVID would hopefully be able to be upscaled, throughout the world and shared in kind of South-South partnerships.
All right, Kate, let's leave the conversation there for now. Thank you very much for your expertise. Absolutely invaluable. We appreciate your perspective. In other news, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says acute hunger could hit over 20 countries in the coming months. Its new report suggests that in Africa, the east of the continent is carrying a heavy burden of hunger. UNFAO says of the over 200 million people in Africa who don't have enough food, over half are in the eastern regions. CGTN's correspondent Coletta Wanjohi has this exclusive interview with Chimimba David Piri, the UNFAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for Eastern Africa.
According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, there are at least 239 million people who are facing starvation in Africa, and 133 million of these are in Eastern Africa.
It is a scourge that in East Africa, we have people that are chronically hungry, are 50% of the whole of Africa's population. And yet the population itself is only less than 25%. How can governments ever want to be comfortable with this situation? Nobody else is going to do it for them. They have to do it themselves.
Experts blame this on climate-related conditions like floods, drought and famine, but also say protracted and new conflicts are making the situation worse. The COVID-19 pandemic has seen border closures, lockdowns and job losses, making it hard for people to get easy food access.
We need agricultural transformation, and agricultural transformation requires that the government puts in money in agriculture. So the governments do make a lot of agreements they sign, whether it's African Union or the UN or elsewhere, East African Community, IGAD, and so on. But then they do not always implement the decisions that they themselves have made.
For now, the desert locust infestation that was a big threat last year in the region is under control.
Thankfully, the amount of rainfall that has fallen in some places does not provide enough moisture for them to breed. But there's always a danger that if more rainfall comes, then we might have a bigger problem of the locust breeding again into March. But I think the situation, we are happy that it is decreasing.
In 2014, African heads of state passed a declaration to end hunger by the year 2025. But not even half of the continent has ratified it so far. The United Nations Secretary General will hold a global food summit later this year. African leaders will participate, and food experts hope they will make commitments that they will be able to accomplish to reduce the growing numbers of hungry people in their countries. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The Ondiri Swamp, which is located on the outskirts of Nairobi, is a key source of water for the Kenyan capital. However, it is now being threatened by the increased human activity around it. Conservationists are racing to preserve the wetland and all its benefits for future generations. CGTN's Wilkester Nyabwa reports.
The trickle of water turns into a steady stream, feeding into a pool where the children swim. But Ondiri Swamp is more than just a playground on a sunny day. It is the lifeblood of the Nairobi River, sending ripples far and wide. It is mid-morning on a weekday, and birds and animals are enjoying the peace and quiet at the swamp. The word Ondiri is a corruption of Old Lake.
Because about 150 years ago, this place used to be an open lake.
David is a coordinator of the Friends of Ondiri Wetlands, an organization with over 300 members that's involved in conservation efforts. A few years, the swamp's very existence came under threat. Ondiri Swamp is the headwater for a tributary of the Nairobi River. It is Africa's second deepest wetland after Douala in Cameroon. It is also the source of Kikuyu Springs, Nairobi City's oldest water source. but human activities have taken their toll. In the past, a section of locals abstracted water illegally. Raw sewage and chemicals from flower farms sometimes drained into the wetland. Fodder harvesters also cut the grass, and the flow of water slowed to a trickle.
The water levels in Kikuyu, especially the boreholes, their water levels were going down. And then it was discovered it's because Ondire was drying. Ondire, actually the water was going, and that's why it couldn't even flow.
Saving the wetland is a community effort. Together with local county government, the Water Resources Management Authority and others, the Friends of Ondiri are teaching locals the importance of safeguarding the resource.
You have planted like 10,000 seedlings, and those seedlings were planted along the riparian area.
It is playing a very major role in climate change mitigation because wetlands absorbs 30% of the atmospheric carbon. So this being an urban ecosystem, you can imagine about the benefits it has to the residents of this area.
The water that runs through Ondiri Swamp is cold, fresh and so clean that one can drink it directly from the source. And that's the reason why the environmentalists who work here continue to do what they do, working to ensure that generations will be able to enjoy this water even after they are gone. The quaking bog has a layer of living vegetation on top of a layer of peat. Walking on the surface feels like bouncing. This, together with a colorful garden and nature trail, attract local tourists. Community members have contributed to the beautification of the swamp, and there's more work to be done yet. But now they and their children get to enjoy the cool waters and enjoy the natural wonder in their backyard. Bulkitanyabo, CGTN.
The World Leaders Summit on Climate has ended, where Nigerian President Buhari was in attendance. Nigerian environmental officials say that developing countries need financial and technical support from developed countries to bridge the gap. It is also critical for developing countries to improve their own governance capabilities.
I see a president that has great compassion for green development and providing solutions to solve problems for the common good of all. He emphasized the need for all to promote green development, which, particularly in developing countries, we have not embraced. And for us to really achieve much, we must embrace that aspect in order to mitigate the issue of climate challenges and also the governance.
Time now for our business segment. Here are the headlines. Direct flights between Russia and 2 Egyptian tourism hubs to resume after more than 5 years. And Nigeria is targeting to grow earnings from export of coconut oil and its byproducts.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Direct flights between Russia and the Egyptian cities of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada will resume after more than 5 years. Flights to the resort destinations were suspended after a Russian passenger plane crashed in the Sinai in October 2015, killing 224 people. Egypt and Russia have agreed to resume all flights between them in a call between their presidents Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Vladimir Putin. The Egyptian statement did not specify a timeline for the resumption of flights, but Russia's Interfax news agency reported that the flights could resume in the second half of May. The decision to resume flights follows a joint cooperation between the two sides and is based on standards of security. Nigeria is targeting to grow earnings of exporting coconut oil and its byproduct. The country generated $150 million from exporting the crop in 2020 and is projecting to earn $250 million this year. As Kelechi Mekalam reports, the crop is also a key income earner for more than 500,000 Nigerian households.
Tens of thousands of coconut stacked in this storehouse in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The priced commodity is highly sought after both locally and internationally. Having been in the business for over 2 decades, Sani Aliyu is reaping the benefits of the commodity's high demand.
I make a profit of over 200,000 naira daily. Coconut business is lucrative. I could sell a truckload of coconut in a week or at most in 2 weeks.
Hundreds of thousands of Nigerians are raking in millions of dollars from the coconut value chain. For Rosemary Akwash, what started off as a side hustle has now become her main source of income, earning her an average $2,000 monthly from coconut byproducts such as oil, flour, and water.
I had individuals, in Canada, in UK, in US, request for my coconut oil, and I have sold to them. There's actually the opportunity to sell more. Unfortunately, the size of machine I have don't have that capacity. Some of the challenges basically that I've faced is one, lack of equipment, not necessarily because they are not available, but they are quite expensive, especially with the exchange rate.
Nigeria generated a record $150 million from the export of coconut oil and other byproducts in 2020. The figures are expected to rise to $250 million by the end of 2021. But industry watchers are calling for more government action to leverage on the boom in order to grow the country's GDP.
That's a very welcome development which has immense potential to the economy, immense benefits to strengthen the economy. But the question still lies in the sufficiency of what we're doing, because even as it is, even as we're generating $150 million now, as the records have it for 2020, Nigeria is still shortchanging itself of over $1 billion revenue annually. We have a potential of generating $1 billion from coconut value chain, coconut exports. But we're still doing $150 million.
Coconut accounts for 10% of agricultural exports from Nigeria. It's currently earning up to 15% of its projected annual revenue. But experts believe it could go up to 50% if the nation ramps up production efforts. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The Chinese embassy in Nigeria has held a seminar to discuss governance and how political parties can contribute to the growth and development of the country. The gathering took place at the Chinese Culture Center in Abuja. The event was in honor of the 50th anniversary of China-Nigeria relations, as well as to mark the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. Representatives of both China and Nigeria discussed efforts made by the Communist Party of China in ensuring the country's prosperous future and role in the global community. During his speech, Chinese ambassador to Nigeria, Cui Jianchuan, said that party governance is important towards 21st century development for every country.
If you want to develop the country, if you want to serve the people, if you want the people proud of your country, the party really is very important, because the party is formulated by the advanced intellectuals, by the loyalists, by the people who want to serve the countries.
Let me use this opportunity to congratulate the People's Republic of China as we reminisce on her giant strides in all spheres of human endeavor, and to note the enormous prosperity, welfare, and human capital development of her citizens and global allies.
Conservation body Sandparks has praised firefighters for their bravery and dedication in fighting a devastating blaze in Cape Town. The fire broke out at Table Mountain National Park nearly a week ago. Sandparks said the fire came at a time when tourism is still battling to get back on its feet amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Renee Delcaram reports.
Besides the destruction of iconic buildings at the University of Cape Town, around 650 hectares of land in the Table Mountain National Park also went up in flames. This included the historic restaurant and tea garden at the 109-year-old Rhodes Memorial Monument on the slopes of Devil's Peak.
We are quite saddened by the fact that this restaurant was not spared by this fire. This is one of the heritage buildings that we have within the Table Mountain National Park. But we are equally happy that no lives were lost.
Sandparks, which manages South Africa's 20 national parks and other attractions, has been struggling financially due to the low density of tourists because of COVID-19. And this 2021 mountain fire has come as yet another major blow.
This was a very, very bad fire. It was a dangerous fire. We're not where we want to be. We're really not where we want to be, because we still need to follow the protocols, making sure that our camps are not chock-a-block fully. So we're operating in terms of limited numbers at this particular moment. That in itself, it tells you that the revenue that we're supposed to be generating is not it's not good at this particular moment.
It is still very, very dry. We haven't had rain now for a couple of weeks within Cape Town, so the veld is extremely dry. There's still going to be smoke for a number of days because of the fuel load, of pine trees and eucalyptus trees. And at this stage, if you walk the area, you will see that it burned right into the ground. For more or less a meter, it can burn into the ground.
Sandparks says it has appointed an independent forensic investigator to help identify the cause of the fire. Meanwhile, firefighters are still on the ground, monitoring the situation in case of further flare-ups.
And as Sandparks continues assessing the extent of the fire damage and feeling the heat over the loss of tourism dollars, it expects the forensic report to be completed within the next 2 weeks. Renee Delcaram, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Today is China's Space Day, and the country has named its first Mars rover, Zhurong, a fire god in ancient Chinese mythology. China launched a global naming campaign last year after the successful launch of the Tianwen-1 Mars probe. The public was invited to vote on social media among 10 candidate names. Zhurong is 1.85 meters high and weighs 240 kilograms. It is expected to work for 92 days. China's spacecraft Tianwen-1 has been operating on the parking orbit of Mars after making an orbital maneuver and entering the orbit 2 months ago. So far, it has captured high-definition images multiple times, and it will continue to work on the planned studies, including topographic features and meteorological environment, preparing for an eventual Mars landing. Also in space is China's Chang'e 4 probe, launched in December 2018. On Monday, it completed its work on 29th lunar day on the far side of the moon and has entered lunar night dormancy. According to Yang Liwei, Deputy Chief Designer of China's manned space program, plans are in place for 11 missions, including 4 crewed Shenzhou spaceships and sending 12 astronauts into space this year and the next. The combination of core module of China's first space station, Tianhe, and the Long March 5B Y2 rocket has been transported to the launch pad of the Wenchang spacecraft launch site in South China's Hainan province. According to China's Manned Space Agency, the next step is various pre-launch function tests and joint tests. Earlier, we spoke to Professor Yang Yuguang from the China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation. Let's take a listen.
Long March 5B is a derivative or a member of the Long March 5 families, which have 1.5 stage. It is the only carrier rocket in the world that only have 1.5 stage to entering the orbit. So it is very unique. And the capability is more than 20 tons, probably 25 tons. So this is the only launch vehicle in China that can launch the major modules, such as the Tianhe, Wentian, and Mengtian modules into space. So this launch vehicle is very important. That is the reason last year we performed a test launch to prove that this launch vehicle is reliable and can be used for launching the core module, which is very important for our space station's construction.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
During Ramadan, adult Muslims abstain from eating and drinking from dawn to dusk. In the early hours of the morning, people have a meal before the long day of fasting ahead. In Cairo, a female Mesaharati has undertaken the duty to awaken residents to fulfill their religious obligations. Let's take a look.
It was grief that drove Haja Dalal Abdel Kader to revive a decades-old family tradition carried out during the holy month of Ramadan. Her late brother was a Mesaharati who used drums to wake up people every day at dawn to eat before fasting. He performed the job for almost 25 years.
He passed away in 2011, and I started doing this in 2012. I found myself when I picked up his drum and made rhythms with it while walking down the street, singing. I found that my neighbors who knew me and knew my brother supported me. Great job, Umar Tef, they would say. Keep going. You remind us of your brother Haj Ahmed.
It's an uncommon sight to see a woman roaming in the streets of Cairo alone at night. However, residents in Dalal's neighborhood are now used to her wake-up call and often rely on it. Dalal hopes she can fulfill her duty to the community like her brother once did.
We've known her for the past 5 years since she started coming here. She's such a decent woman, we wait for her to pass by and don't wake up except after hearing her lovely voice.
The practice is still performed by many across the Muslim world, despite technological advances. Some use musical instruments and others do it while wearing traditional dress. The message remains the same: wake up and eat.
I took this job from my brother, may he rest in peace, because I used to go out with him and watch what he does and how people loved him and would wait for him each year. I love this job because of my brother, and the year he passed away, there was no Mesaharati. We were all waiting for someone to pass by in our street to wake us up, but nobody came.
Almost 10 years have passed since Dalal took up the responsibility. Her role has been made easier by the support of her family, and it's a job she hopes to continue in the fulfillment of religious obligation during this Islamic holy month. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's what's ahead. African football teams at the Tokyo Olympics face an uphill task after being drawn in tough groups.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find